obviously I love trails in West Virginia. I love trails in Moab. I've spent a lot of time in Moab, many trips, and British Columbia. But the gnarliness of the Inca roads in Bolivia just doesn't compare to anything else. Like being able to, one,
welcome to Trail Effect. I am your host, Josh Blum. Trail Effect is a show that dives into the stories behind trails, the communities that embrace trails, and the people who rely on trails as a way of life. The goal of this show is to turn the stories you will hear from our guests into useful knowledge that can be applied to your community while providing some entertaining and inspirational content. Guests on Trail Effect include trail builders, board members, community leaders, volunteers, and regular people who really enjoy trails. For episode 207, Phil Waidner is our guest. Now, if you read the title, it says West Virginia Mountain Biking and the Arrowhead Bike Farm. This is where Phil lives and what Phil does. But how he got here is a whole different story. Phil took us from Indiana to Ashville, to China to Bolivia, to Vail, Colorado, and finally to Fayetteville, West Virginia. He's had a lot of different roles in the mountain bike community that span from tour guide, instructor, to leading teen trail corps for NICA, and a ton more. There is so much to unpack about this conversation that an intro just won't do it justice. The Outdoor Marketing Bootcamp is where outdoor brands, organizations, and trail builders get real about marketing. On February 17th and 18th, 2026, join a 2-day virtual training with top outdoor marketing pros like Jed Gunn from Truck Bikes, Mark Ayler from Leave No Trace, and many others who know how to get your message heard. You'll learn story frameworks, audience strategies, and grant-winning tactics tailored to the outdoor world. If you want your marketing to work as hard as the projects you are building, this bootcamp is for you. You can check it out at www.outdoormarketingbootcamp.com or hit the link in the show notes. Now on to the Trail Effect with Phil Waidner. Here we are today on Trail Effect. I've got Phil Waidner, who is the owner / I'm going to say co-owner, correct, of Arrowhead Bike Farm.
Yeah, co-owner and full operator. Yep.
Yeah. Phil comes to us today from Fayetteville, West Virginia, and that is also the region that is kind of famously known for the New River Gorge National Park, which it's actually the newest national park, correct?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's a region that has a huge amount of, we're going to say, outdoor recreation from a whitewater kayaking and rock climbing perspective. And it flies under the radar a little bit when it comes to trails and mountain biking. So we're going to learn about that today. But first, we're going to learn about how Phil got to where he is today, because he didn't grow up here, correct?
No, I didn't. No, I born in California and grew up mostly in Indiana. So it's been a journey to get here for sure. A lot of other stops along the way.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your backstory and how you got, from California to Indiana to mountain biking. And I know you spent some time in the upper Midwest and then down now in West Virginia.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was born in California. That's where a large part of my both my mom and dad's families are at. But it was really, my parents' jobs that brought us to Indiana. And actually my dad was working for an engineering company in Santa Barbara, California, and they shut it down and they gave him the option of LA or Indiana, and they knew they were not fans of LA, so they decided to see what the cornfields had to offer. So I grew up mostly in Indiana, heavily involved in Boy Scouts, and like most 90s kids in a neighborhood, I was on my bike like all the time. Every waking hour, I was on my bike running around the neighborhood, and we had a patch of woods behind our house, so I was always riding back there and building tiny little jumps and whatnot, and just adventuring on a bike, right? So that's really what like inspired the love for biking right off the bat. And then through like Boy Scouts growing up, I got more into just the woods and the outdoors and mountain biking. And I think that's like what drove the initial passion, right?
So when people think of Indiana, I think most people, at least, let me back up. When mountain bikers think of Indiana, when people think Indiana in general, they might think of Indianapolis 500 or something like that. But when mountain bikers think of Indiana, I think Brown County is probably the first thing that comes to mind, correct? So how much of an impact?
Absolutely, yeah. So when I was growing up, Brown County State Park was not the mountain biking destination it is now. That happened pretty much after I left Indiana, and I've been back to Brown County multiple times. My parents still live in Indiana, so I'm at Brown County a few times, and it's it's awesome. It's the trails there are amazing. But when I was growing up there, there were nothing like that, right? So I grew up in a suburb north of Indianapolis called Carmel, and it has a reputation for just being like a super ritzy place and not very exciting for anything really. However, we did have one mountain bike trail called Town Run Park. And I think that at the time that was probably in my limited view as a kid growing up in Indiana, I'm pretty sure that was like one of the most well-known mountain bike trails in Indiana at the time. We also had Nebo Ridge and the Knobone Trail. Both of those were down near Brown County State Park. And they were like just really raw, like not purpose-built mountain bike trails, not that sustainable of built trails to begin with. But they were definitely like considered the adventure trails back then, the place that you would have to drive a fair amount of distance to get to and go for that long adventure. But like by today's standards, they were very like raw trails, right? And that kind of that sort of gnar that people loved back then. They still do.
Oh yeah, for sure. So Brown County first got on my radar as a mountain bike place because they held skills clinics there, and specifically women's skills clinics. And this would have been over a decade ago. I think the first time I went there would have been in 2012. I know you've had some involvement with that. Let's talk about how you transitioned into like getting into teaching people how to mountain bike.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what, to be clear, I didn't have any involvement in the Indiana Brown County skills clinics. So teaching mountain biking, I really like right from high school. I had an internship with an awesome organization called Camptown, took inner city kids out backpacking. And that's what, through that organization, is the first time I realized that there's actually people who make a living doing recreational stuff in the outdoors. That was the first time I was like, whoa, it's totally mind blowing. And I ended up going to college, super awesome place called Warren Wilson near Ashville, North Carolina. Just a outdoorsy hippie college up in the mountains in North Carolina. And awesome trails right there on property, tons of mountain bikers, rock climbers, boaters. So that's where in college I got really into climbing and biking. And I was working for a lot of summer camps in my summers. And so I worked for 3 summer camps from high school to post-college years, and was involved in some sort of mountain biking with all of them. One of them was actually a mountain bike instructor. Another one I was just leading general wilderness trips up in the northern Wisconsin, Minnesota region, and did develop a fun mountain bike trip for that camp. And then also the very first outdoors job was working for a Boy Scout camp in Indiana, and I did a little bit of mountain biking for them as well. But that's really where the love of teaching sports really came to me. And like when I went off to college, I thought I was going to get into like wilderness therapy and trying to like do therapy through bikes in the woods, and pretty quickly realized, like once I did some kind of internship type stuff with wilderness therapy organizations, realized that was not the world I wanted to be in. And as I got more involved with like tourism stuff as well, I just really enjoyed the clients and the guests that I had on my trips, and realized that like I just really love taking people out who are passionate about, or not necessarily passionate about the sport, but we're like passionate about trying something new. They were there specifically to try something new, to adventure, to have fun. It's such a pleasure to be able to like work with people who are stoked to come to you as a customer, and like they're excited to have fun. And so it just helps me like build up my energy to be able to teach them something new and introduce them to something new. And so then from there, I had jobs. Like I had a job out in China for a while, putting together like custom adventure tours for really large, mostly school groups. And we did a lot of, with that trip specifically, or that time I lived in China, we were doing a lot of rock climbing. And so my rock climbing experience and my certifications at the time led into that job of doing more climbing guiding, but we were also doing biking and caving and boating. And we'd have like, service trips in there as well. But I realized that like all the time I was renting these like terrible like cruiser bikes from town. Like they're full of rust. They might have a shock on them, but they don't work at all, you know? And they're just like, they've obviously been sitting outside rusting for decades. I had to rent these bikes for super cheap and go off into the hills on trails that people have been, you know, walking for millennia, and having a ton of fun riding these terrible bikes on just raw fun trails, right? And I just realized like how much mountain biking I was really missing, like while there. And every time we had a mountain bike activity with one of the tours we were leading, it was just like, it made my day, you know, it made my whole week be able to have one mountain bike block with one of those groups. So that actually led me to realize like how much I really missed true mountain biking. From there, I got a job in Bolivia leading downhill mountain bike trips with gravity assisted mountain biking. And if you haven't talked to them yet, you should definitely talk to them. They got a great story.
I've heard of them.
They're awesome. It's definitely like, it's a Kiwi guy named Alistair who just, I don't know. I think he was traveling in Bolivia in like the 90s, and he discovered this road and he started leading bike trips on it. And then he also started, you know, exploring and discovering bike trails within the local area. So it's called the Death Road, is the main, like the bread and butter of that company is leading trips down what they call the Death Road, or the world's most dangerous road. And it's a just a single lane gravel road with a few, you know, it's got pullouts occasionally for vehicles to pass. But it used to be like one of the main routes between La Paz and like Brazil, the Amazon, you know? And so it's just a single lane gravel road with like 3,000 foot sheer cliffs right off the side. So extremely easy trail with really high consequence for failure. And it used to be, it's called the world's most dangerous road because when it used to be the main route through that area, it had an endless amount of crashes, vehicle crashes, large buses, large trucks going off. And so that kind of adds to the history of it and kind of the perception of danger. So, I mean, and then it is like, it's a very professional outfit. You start off at like 15,500 feet. You get your, tryout time on the bike. They teach the guests everything they need to know about riding. It's an amazing how many of these guests haven't been on a bike since they were 8. And they're like, this is the time to try biking again, you know? And then take them down the Death Road. And it's about 40 miles long with about 12,500 vertical feet of descent. So pretty phenomenal. You start off just in high alpine and you end in like the Amazon jungle. That was our bread and butter. And then we also I'd say maybe 20% of our job was guiding real mountain biking trips on just epic trails all around the Bolivian kind of highlands area, the Altiplano and whatnot, and the mountains. And then couple of our trips would start, we're actually on old Incan roads. So you had like perfectly well-preserved Incan paved roads up high at like 15,000 feet. And then by the time you get down to the jungle, it's just like this jumbled mess of gnarly, huge rocks from all the erosion and the tree roots and everything. So phenomenal riding, absolutely phenomenal riding. But so when I moved from China to Bolivia, and I was just guiding mountain bike trips all the time, and then I was still surrounded by phenomenal rock climbing and mountain climbing too. And I told myself that I would like get into mountain climbing because there was really epic, like pretty easy-ish mountains to climb and get onto some glaciers. And it would have been a great spot to like really try and learn more about glacier and mountain climbing. And I honestly, I just didn't. I was mountain biking all the time and exploring new mountain bike trails with friends and getting into there's a really serious downhill Bolivian mountain bike scene. They have, races around the country. They've got a mega avalanche style race, and they used to call it the Inca Avalanche, but they had to change the name because of copyright stuff. But it's in Peru near Machu Picchu. So there's just like a really hardcore, awesome scene of mountain bikers in Bolivia and Peru, and I never would have known about it had I not been there, And so I found that I just wasn't rock climbing at all anymore, and that was like, all right, this is like mountain biking is what I want to do. I need to figure out a way to make this my job. And, Bolivia was awesome, but I was also like, I was making like $50 a day and able to live really well down there on that amount of money. But it was also kind of like not a lot of space to move. So I decided it was time to come home and figure out what's next. I ended up working for Vail Resorts for 3 years as a ski instructor, really because a buddy was like, if you come out here, I'll teach you how to ski well enough in a week that you'll get through instructor training. And then sure enough, I got through instructor training, and I was not the worst skier in the instructor training, but I think I was the second worst. And I taught little kids how to ski until I got better enough, and probably by like January, I was taking higher levels out skiing on the mountain and stuff, and so it was a great experience, and it really helped steer my instructional philosophy. So we're like in Bolivia, I got my first real introduction to kind of a standardized intro to mountain biking that we would give all of our guests. We would give them the same spiel and have them do the same kind of ride around floor of their bike. And while there was a little bit of that at some of the summer camps I worked at, and I kind of helped create a little bit of that at certain places, like I didn't really know what I was doing until I think that Bolivia job was the first one. I was like, okay, this is really what a professional outfit looks like. And then when I went to work for Vail and I went through all the PSIA ski instruction certification, it was my first real like, okay, here's kind of coaching, a professional education in coaching, and I'm able to pair that with what I already know from mountain biking. And I really got the gears cranking on like, how do I apply these concepts to mountain biking, right? And so then two things kind of happened simultaneously. One, I was trying to, it dawned, or I discovered that there were organizations out there who were doing kind of the PSA thing for mountain biking. And I reached out to both of the big ones and only heard back from one of them. And so that's where I went to do one of their general mountain bike instructor certifications. That was at the time, it was the IMBA ICP program, and is now the BICP program, Bike Instructor Certification Program. And I got involved with them right about the same time that I also discovered a job posting in West Virginia, looking for it was the Boy Scouts, and I hadn't been involved in the Boy Scouts since my very first job in the outdoors. But somebody who was involved in the project in West Virginia knew of me, from my time in the Boy Scouts in Indiana. They knew of my qualifications and what I'd been doing and everything, and they encouraged me to apply for this job, right? And
let's pause right there, because I'm going to bring us back to that. I have some questions. From Indiana to China.
We did.
Bolivia to Vail. Which there's a little bit more. There's a couple, two different directions I want to take this. One is, how do you find out about a mountain biking operation in Bolivia when you're in China? And I'm asking that from the perspective of, let's timestamp that so we can put a, kind of a narrative around what stage mountain biking was in at that time.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great idea. Okay. So to really back up there for a second, like to get that job in China, I was involved in a few like outdoorsy job boards, and I can't remember exactly which one I found it on. Like maybe Coolworks, but I don't think it was Coolworks. I think it was one that was more like free. I honestly just can't remember though, but I found it on an outdoorsy job board, this job in China. And so then while I was in China, and I knew that I wanted to continue the international thing. I was really loving international travel. There was also a snafu where I overstayed my visa in China and I was getting kicked out of the country. So I needed to figure something else out. I thought about just traveling for a while, but I didn't have much money. And I remembered that one of my bosses, one of the guys who owned the summer camp I worked at in Wisconsin, had one time gone on a mountain bike tour in Bolivia. And he had met the owner of the company and everything. And so I think I reached out to him, and he didn't really have the connections to know the owner, but he was like, yeah, this is the company that I went with. They were super awesome. And I think I just cold emailed the company to be like, hey, you hiring? You need instructors or guides? And sure enough, they got back to me. Later, one of them made fun of me because when I submitted my application, it was like a thesis. Like they had like a whole list of questions, right? And you're supposed to just answer the questions. And I guess like all of my answers were like, I don't know, a couple paragraphs long. So it made the entire thing like a little 4 or 5 pages long. But they were super stoked on what I'd already been doing in China, because they were one of the only, possibly the only company at the time, because they had popularized this death road route. And so, of course, whenever you make something like that popular, there's tons of other companies that hop on board. So there is a whole industry of tour companies in Bolivia now doing the death road on bikes. And they advertise that they're the only company that offers vertical rescue experience. And that's that's one thing that I was coming from China and my previous degrees and certifications with, is, a knowledge of vertical rescue and et cetera. So that's one reason that they were pretty excited to bring me on board. Also, I had some, mountain bike guiding experience already on my belt a little bit. And so that's really where, a cold email is really what got me the job. And it's, yeah.
So now we're going to go to Vail. This is more of an instructing question. So you'd mentioned when you went to Vail, you actually didn't know how to ski. And you were going there to become a ski instructor. And where I'm going with this is, how much of becoming a ski instructor, taking the PSIA courses, and paired with teaching people how to mountain biking, how much did that actually help you become a better skier and a better mountain biker?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that one, there's definitely like, I'd already learned so much. Like in college, I went really quickly from never having rock climbed to taking groups out rock climbing. And I'd learned so much, like just went from being just an amateur kid who rides his bike in the woods behind the house to teaching people how to ride, that I had like a certain confidence that like I knew how to teach people stuff. I knew that if I could learn to ski, that I would be a good ski instructor. Like I was just confident. And then I think that's maybe the I can't remember the trendy term for it right now, but like maybe I was overconfident, but it, obviously it worked, I had been skiing 5 times. So it wasn't like I'd never been skiing before. I didn't know that, at least, back when I was a kid, I had learned how to ski, and I had skied black diamonds, not very well. Mostly, I was that kid who that just straight shot them. And that's easy to do when you're on the hills of Indiana. They're not, the straight shot isn't that long. But I didn't know, so it wasn't like I was completely at zero. But I did have that confidence that I would be able to learn how to ski. And then I knew from Boy Scouts and from college that I knew how to teach people things, and I was confident that I could learn it. So so I just had the confidence that I knew how to teach people things, and I knew I could learn the sport, and I was confident that I could learn it. And it also helped that I had friends who were there teaching, and one of my best friends in particular was like, yeah, I will teach you how to ski, and you'll be good enough to pass the instructor training. And sure enough, because, you're teaching everything from, well, specifically I was in the I think it started at 6 to 18, right? So obviously a 6-year-old never ever, you don't have to be a very good skier to be able to just teach a never ever 6-year-old how to ski. And so that was the whole philosophy behind Vail, is that okay, you clearly have the experience that we're looking for as an instructor. And then as you get more experience skiing, you'll become a better ski instructor. And especially also because I dove headfirst into PSA, and I had my level 1 certification within a month of starting. And that helped a lot in terms of teaching philosophy and just teaching how the body moves, and coming up with standardized ways of explaining how the body moves, how the body affects the skis, how you maintain balance. And that has really helped me to be able to standardize the way that you talk about things so that you can quickly bring it up. We don't have to think about okay, how do I need to explain this? You just already have those words in your head to be able to explain each movement, each level of progression.
Yeah. And the reason why I went there was because I know for a lot of years, I coached ski racing in the Midwest and grew up ski racing, but it wasn't until I started coaching that I really kind of had to figure out what you're just talking about is how to explain things to people. And in that process, I felt like I learned how to ski better during that because I had to think about what I was doing a lot more than just going out and doing it. Right. And so I could imagine that really kind of helped accelerate your learning process because you had to teach it. Right.
Absolutely. And both with like mountain bikes and skiing, like for all of us who just learned on the fly as a kid, or maybe like one of our parents taught us, we get a lot of bad habits, right? Mm-hmm. So like there's certain things that you learn as an instructor that are just foundational level stuff that just sets you up better to have better balance and be better prepared to execute some other maneuver, right?
For sure. Yeah, you're not maybe just following somebody else down a trail or down a ski run because they know how to do it and you're just trying to keep up, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting thing. And now, so where I paused you was at, you're coming back to teach at a Boy Scout camp in West Virginia.
Yeah. So I got somebody reached out, said, hey, I think, this job would be right up your alley. You should you should apply for it. And I did. So basically the Boy Scouts own a few national bases around the country. The most famous one being in New Mexico. It's called Philmont. They also have a base up in the Boundary Waters called Northern Tier. And they have a base down in the Florida Keys called Sea Base. So they all kind of have their theme, right? Like Philmont is all about backpacking. They've got a ton of like camps spread out through this huge region, this giant ranch they own. And the kids backpack from subcamp to subcamp or base camp and do all these typical summer camp type activities. Some are typical, some are very not typical. There's a lot of history there. There's a ton of history of Philmont. Super cool. So then they also have this, the Northern Tier is all about canoeing and cross-country skiing and dog sledding in the winter. It's still a dream of mine to get up there and do some of that dog sledding. And then Sea Base is more of your Caribbean type stuff, right? Sailing, scuba diving, snorkeling, whatever, all that stuff. I haven't been there yet, but also high on the list. So the Summit Bechtel Reserve here in West Virginia was the Boy Scouts' newest national base. It was a combination of things. One, they had to, the Boy Scouts hold an annual national jamboree, or not annual, but every 4-year national jamboree. It had been at a military base in Virginia for a long time, and they needed a new permanent home for it. So that was a big part of the process. But they also just had this big property. They didn't want to use it just for once every 4 years. They needed to get some use out of it. And they really leaned into what is West Virginia famous for? What is this area famous for? What does the terrain really do? And what is new for the Boy Scouts? What would be unique and different? And the Boy Scouts have long done backpacking and canoeing and a lot of those more traditional outdoor sports really well. They had not really dipped their feet really deep into mountain biking and skateboarding and all sorts of stuff like that. So that was my job, was coming in to develop all of those programs for them. So I was in charge of skateboarding, mountain biking, BMX, and ATV. And skateboarding was my weakest. I had to learn all about skateboarding for that job. And BMX a little bit too. I had a little bit of knowledge on BMX, but I was never like a BMX racer or anything. So I had to learn more about BMX as well. And then actually it was a few years after I started that we added the ATV and learned a lot about that. But yeah, it was really like being able to bring my PSA experience. And I think, a lot of my goals of using BICP and my PSA experience to develop a kind of a standardized curriculum and training program for our staff there and build up those programs is what got me the job there.
With that, you need to have trails, right? Was there trails on the site already? Did you have to improve the trails, or how did that all kind of like shape itself?
The summit was brand new when I started there. So they did have, that was part of the epicness of the summit, was that they had built this really amazing facility for all the things they were doing. So it wasn't just sports I was doing. I was actually one of 4 departments. So besides trails, we also had like shooting sports, and we had this big aquatic and whitewater program, and we had this big aerial program. And with all of these programs, they had built just like epic, huge facilities for it, to be able to take in all those kids. So they actually had Gravity Logic build about 35 miles of trail, mountain bike specific trail on the property. And they were super fast, flowy trails. There was a little bit of like techie, rocky gnarly trails down at the bottom. And then just some like really awesome flow trails up in the valley. And so we had trails to use right there. So we also had
just like hand you the keys to these new Gravity Logic trails.
Pretty much. They were like, here's this giant facility. They took me. I had not even been there yet. I did my job interview via computer, so I had not even been there yet when they took me on a tour, and my mind was blown. I was expecting like summer camp level stuff, and it was like, well, just huge. And a lot of it, like, I want to like avoid, because a lot of it was very like, it was all very beginner friendly. So a lot of times they would, like, general, and people in general will say like, oh, it's like X Games level type stuff. It's really like they had X Games, or not even like, they had like professional quantity of stuff, but it was all very like beginner to intermediate oriented, right? So they had what they advertised as like the largest skate park in the country at the time, as long as an aircraft carrier, which really surprised me at how not very long aircraft carriers are. But anyway, it was this really awesome, like linear skate park where it started off just super beginner, flat. Actually, it started off totally flat. And then you had some easy, really easy ramps and rollers, all concrete, with a little bit of metal stuff. And then you get into like a street park section. It's got like really progressive elements. They've got like a flow section. And then it was the same way with the mountain bike trails, where you had down the bottom, you had some intro stuff, a little bit of rocky trail. You had some pump tracks, you had some dirt jumps, you had a BMX track down the bottom, and then up in the valley, the trails like had a nice easy loop at the bottom, and then they kind of like spidered out from there. And so you had 2 climbing trails up at the top, and then a bunch of downhill trails at the bottom, and a few like kind of more cross country type trails, all like within this one valley, all kind of funneling back down to the bottom. So it was extremely beginner friendly. Really easy terrain to teach on. They had big grassy fields for just starting off, teach people how to ride, teach people the basics, run them through that. Anybody who's ever been through a modern like bike clinic today has probably been through either BACP or PMBI style kind of assessment. And so they had so much space for that. We could do the assessment, we could take them to a little skills course, we could take them to a pump track, and then get on the trails and take them up the trails and do some of the downhill trails. And they had like, the intermediate trails had real jumps on them. They weren't just all keep your wheels on the ground. There were real serious jumps on them, and it was just a really progressive place to be able to get the kids progressing.
So I got 2 questions with that, or 3 questions actually. One is, do they have regular staff that does maintenance on the trails?
No, it was just a really big. And I don't want to monopolize this time.
No, I'm asking this question because people like, I will say, we'll buy a trail system, but there isn't. And I'm only asking this because I want to like instill the fact that you can't just buy the trail system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Nope. So that was the biggest lesson there. And like, it was sad to see, but and a lot of this gets into like, the differences between like who was actually doing the fundraising for the place versus who was actually doing the operating of the place. And the fundraising money did not initially include money for maintenance. They just assumed that the place would start operating and doing so well right off the bat, they would put money in for maintenance. But that didn't really happen, like anywhere, especially the more giant the place is, the longer it's going to take to ramp up. And so the 5 years that I was there, they put very little money into maintenance, and you like we were watching the trails degrade over time and watching the jungle grow in, and it was really sad and ultimately like a big part of why I left, because it wasn't like the program just wasn't getting the kind of funding that it really needed to be successful, and we were successful in getting a lot of kids through, but like we were just watching the facilities degrade in front of our eyes. And it was just so important to, you can't just bring in a ton of money and build all the trails, right? And I think that they would have been more successful if they had built maybe 80% as much trail and then put the rest of that money into maintenance, or even 50% as much trail. If they had like 15 miles of trail and had put the rest of that money into a fund for maintenance, it would have been easier to maintain and they would have been more successful at it.
My next question is, and I don't know the answer at all, so I'm playing totally ignorant here. Is there any aspect of this that's open to the regular public, or is it just 100% used by the Boy Scouts? And the reason why I ask that is because regular use on trails to a certain degree is kind of maintenance.
Yep. So that is and that was a big part of my argument when I was working there, was that we need to get more people on the trails using them, because that by itself would do a lot more to maintain the trails than we're currently using. And I was also in a local trail organization at the time. It was called NRBU, a New River Bicycle Union. It's now no longer. There's a new organization now called Fayetteville Trail Coalition. But at the time that we developed a partnership between Boy Scouts and NRBU that allowed NRBU members to ride the trails out there. And that was fairly successful. It actually it exploded the membership of NRBU. But at the same time, it did not, there were still a lot of hurdles to jump through, because the Boy Scouts are a really large organization. And, anybody who knows the history of the Boy Scouts knows that for good reason, they are super, they're extremely strict about youth protection. Now they are, obviously, if you know about the lawsuits, maybe back in the 80s, they weren't very strict about it. So nowadays they're extremely strict with youth protection, background checks, etc. And so that just meant that the red tape to be able to get people out to ride was a little bit higher, significantly higher than your normal park that you can just show up and go ride, right? They also were, for various reasons that I don't want to get into, because I feel like I might say something wrong, but for various reasons, the Boy Scouts did not want to charge for people to come out and ride. So they couldn't just, they weren't going to just open a bike park, even if it was just open during times that summer camp was not in session, which would have been fall, really. Spring too, but spring here so wet that those trails were like peanut butter in the spring. So they definitely could or still can to this day, could have a really awesome bike park that is operational just in the fall and that's not being used by summer camp programs. And but they're more hesitant. They don't really want to just charge general public to come in there for various reasons. And they never mind. I can't remember. I was going to say something else. I forget.
Those were questions that, it just piqued my interest in terms of I just got 35 miles of trail, right?
Yeah. So, and if you've talked to the WVU guys, have they talked about it at all?
It's on our radar, we'll say.
Okay. Because it's definitely, the summit is a really interesting case study for sure. And WVU has been working with them a lot. It's just, and they have actually, this is important, they have actually just gotten a new donation to improve. They actually built some new trails. So there was a small little trial section and then the main Adventure Valley, but they only had less than a mile as a crow flies between them that was not connected by trail. So a couple of years ago, I came back as a consultant and worked with them to hire a trail company to connect that. So I planned out some general trails for them, and then had Appalachian Dirt come in and do the on the ground routing of the trail and building of it. And so then that gave us a loop from the bottom to Adventure Valley, which ultimately allowed them to have a much nicer loop that allowed them to have a NICA race. So that's the first real mountain bike race they've had out there. And the NICA race has been going on for 4 years now, maybe 5 years, something like that. It's been a while, probably 5 years. Because I think the first year was maybe 2 years. I don't know, 4 or 5 years. The NICA race has been going on there. And it shows that there's definitely potential for some good racing out there. And then they got another donation now to specifically rebuild all the trails that have dilapidated. Actually, no, sorry. Importantly, not all of the trails, just the most important ones. And I think that's really good that they're focusing on what they can maintain right now and not on the entire 35 miles of trail. And then I do know that this donation also comes with endowment money. So they are able to put some money into the trails as well. I don't know exactly how much it is or how much a year they can be able to put in, but I do know that that exists, and that'll help them be much more successful at keeping that trail system running.
Well, I could imagine, and this is maybe a case of hindsight being 2020, knowing that regular use does help trails, going back and like looking at how the setup is, and also knowing that you have the Boy Scouts that have their mission and maybe still wanting to get some of that open to the general public of having it set up so there's like a public facing side to it that's separate from the Boy Scout side. So you could somewhat segregate the uses when there's Boy Scout stuff going on, right? And so the public wouldn't have to interface for all the obvious reasons with the Boy Scouts, and the Boy Scouts could do their thing when they need to, because it's really their space, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of model where you could kind of integrate the two, but have them, cohabitate independently as well.
Yep. And I think that model's there. And in the recent years, they have also started doing they started their like family adventure camp, which allows the public to come out there and ride. And there was a little while that they were doing like day passes where you could pay like $15 to come out there and do a bunch of the different activities, do the trails, the BMX tracks. But I don't think they're doing that anymore. But there is ways. Like I think if you go out there and camp as part of family adventure camp, then you could ride those trails there.
Kettle Mountain Apparel has fall and winter gear dialed. Cold is creeping in, and if you plan to keep getting outside, you'll need layers that actually pull their weight. Kettle delivers with solid base layers, dependable outerwear, and no-nonsense designs that handle real weather. Hit the link in the show notes or on the Trail Effect website when you place your next Kettle Mountain order, and you'll be supporting the show at the same time. Venture far and laugh hard. So you brought up NICA, and that might be your next chapter. I could be jumping the gun a little bit.
It really is, yeah.
Let's go to NICA, because you got hired by NICA to do Teen Trail Corps, again with trails, and maybe some other things as well. But let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I got my start with NICA when Cassie Smith, awesome lady, she just put out the message that, hey, like we want to get NICA into West Virginia. Like we're putting together some folks to make this happen. And I attended the initial, interest meeting, and then jumped super on board. And because I had a potential venue, I jumped right into like, okay, I'll help you with venues and I'll help organize venues and stuff. And then through that process, realized that the summit was actually not an ideal venue because they had fields, the infield space needed for a NICA event, and they had the trail, but they weren't connected. And that's what led to that project I talked about a minute ago. So really, I just got like super into volunteering with NICA. I helped launch the first season of West Virginia NICA League, and organized a lot of and I also I acted as race director that first year. And then that put me on the radar of NICA National, and they approached me to apply for a job that they had actually gotten a bunch of applications for, but they didn't. They extended the application period, I think, so I could apply. And then I applied for that and got it. And so that was like the role was managing their Teen Trail Corps program and their camps program. That's what it started out as. Teen Trail Corps was their service learning program, and that was where I brought a lot of my Boy Scout philosophy there, where I was trying to bring a culture of service to like NICA. And honestly, like a lot of that culture of service already exists within the mountain bike community. So I don't want to say like I brought the culture there. The culture already exists within like I feel like every NICA league has at least one, if not multiple, trail organizations that are closely aligned with it, in a close relationship with it, because usually the same people that were like, yes, we're advocating for trails in the state, are like, yes, let's bring kids riding on more trails, because that's an obvious connection, right? Get more kids riding and you'll have more mountain bikers. And so I guess it really not like my role was more developing a curriculum and a program so we can bring out that culture of service that already exists. How can we get more kids interested in doing service so that the NICA teams aren't just doing their own thing, but they're also going out and joining the local work days. They're working on their trails. They're helping prep the trails for the race, and they're helping fix the trails post-race, that type of stuff. And so that Teen Trail course saw some revisions over the years. And then the other aspect of what I was working on was also camps, where they had a lot of leagues trying to put on these kind of like quasi summer camps. And usually they'd go camp at one of their venues or a state park or something and ride, multiple days in a row doing clinics and skills stuff and whatnot. But I think the most important thing that I brought was the lessons learned from Boy Scout youth protection. Because once you introduce sleeping overnight as a group, just the risk and the things that you need to think about, goes up exponentially. There's just a lot more stuff that you really need to think about in terms of protecting the kids and making sure that it's going off safely. So I brought a lot of that from the Boy Scouts and helped create a curriculum and kind of a set of standards for the ways that NICA leagues could operate a camp and run a camp.
From the outside looking in, the Teen Trail Corps has been hugely successful in getting kids, we're going to say, hours of service work as a component of NICA racing. You want to expand on that some?
Yeah, so I think that was the most successful thing that we did with Teen Trail Corps, was just create a tool that allowed leagues to track service hours of the kids. And then that in itself allowed the teams to then reward those service hours. And so it really varied across the leagues. I think just having a group of Teen Trail Corps advocates and league directors who would come together and discuss that at least like once a month or however often we were doing it was huge in terms of just sharing knowledge and sharing the ways that other leagues were doing things. So some leagues were directly rewarding Teen Trail Corps hours with race points. Some leagues were making it kind of its own competition adjacent to the races, but not affecting your actual race score. There were all sorts of cool prizes like, custom trail tools with engraved wording on them, or oftentimes like Teen Trail Corps student athletes were getting like their membership free within the local organization, stuff like that. And so then that just provided more motivation and more ways for kids to get out there and participate, and for the teams to really build it up. It's like, let's add this, let's be the greatest team on the Teen Trail Corps. So again, that actually was in West Virginia, since we were tracking Teen Trail Corps hours, like basically per capita, like how many Teen Trail Corps hours does the team have per kids on the team, so that you're actually getting, all the kids out working or a high average. I remember the team that won the Teen Trail Corps competition the very first year was a team of 3 because they had all 3 of their kids out working all the time.
They didn't ride their bikes. They just became trail builders or trail maintainers.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So then the leagues had all this information on this record of how many hours their student athletes were giving back to the local trails. And they could show like the leagues that were really active with Teen Trail Corps had thousands upon thousands of hours that, they were just blowing other local volunteers like out of the water, because they're just like, they have so many kids. There are so many kids and they're all out there doing service. And it's much higher than your typical, like, oh, we expect about 10% of our riders to come out and actually, work on a trail or whatever. And it was just phenomenal success with just the amount of hours that they were bringing in. And then, we made the tool so they could break it down, so they could show exactly which parks they were working at or which agencies they were doing service for. And they could break it down by the team and the local zip code. So let's say that a city is thinking about building some more trail or something. It was really easy just to pull the numbers and say, hey, look, this is the number of hours that NICA student athletes have done in service specifically in this zip code or in these few zip codes around this park or something like that. Or if it's a specific agency, they could say, hey, look, like we've done this many hours for this agency within this radius region. So obviously, like most of these kids are probably working at this single park, right? And so they could say, like, pretty confident that like we've put in this many hours of service at this park, and just demonstrate just the amount that they were putting into the park, and also use those for grant funding and in-kind hours, etc.
Well, and then generally speaking, you're instilling the fact that these trails come with a cost, right? And what I mean by that is like you don't just get to go out and use them for your race or your practice. Like there's people working on them, and you show the kids, which then become adults, which maybe then, stay in outdoor activities, that one, you have a viable career path, but two, trails need to get maintained. They don't just, we joke that there's trail fairies, right? And there really isn't.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was, like getting the kids out there and showing them like, this is mountain biking. This is what mountain biking has always been. And if we're going to continue having awesome trails, we need to do this. Cause like you go out to other sports and most of the time, like most football teams are not out there painting the lines and maintaining their football field. There are obviously like every sports team out there does fundraisers, whether it's for their uniforms or maybe for something specific to the field, like a capital fundraising campaign for their field or something. But the kids aren't getting dirty. Like the kids aren't out there. Most of the time, I'm sure you can find some examples out there, but most of the time your football team is not out there mowing the grass and painting the lines and painting the field goal or the basketball court or the tennis court or whatever, right? So like this is mountain biking. This is one of the things that like if you want more mountain bike trails, you have to get involved in trail maintenance and advocating for more trails. And there is definitely an explosion of public money into trails within the last decade or so. But we still have to you still have to get really involved and fight for that money and show up and work on the trails.
I say it almost every episode. I spent a handful of years in highway maintenance in Wisconsin DOT. You can look at any agency and it seems like, or anything that has to do with public funding or even private funding, it seems like there's always funding that you can find for the new stuff, but it's really hard to find the funding or the tools that you need. And I mean, all the tools to continue to maintain whatever said item is. It could be tennis courts, whatever, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
The new buildings get built. The lawn still needs to get mowed.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And new stuff is exciting for people, and maintenance isn't always that exciting, but you can make some trails pretty rad that have had a lack of maintenance, right?
Exactly. Yep. And that's where Teen Trail Corps was focused all on maintenance. It really like the service the kids were doing was supposed to be for maintenance and not for building new trail. And then we also did we encouraged the kids to get out and advocate for any trail related stuff. So they could definitely be out there advocating for new trails. But the maintenance hours were supposed to be for maintenance, And I think that was a really good leading by example type of thought. And then, so there was also another kind of path to Teen Trail Corps that did not do very well, and we kind of killed it off. It was called Teen Trail Corps Captain, and it was kind of like an award system towards basically kind of showing that this is a person who has educated themselves thoroughly about maintaining trail and advocating for trails, and this is and they've demonstrated a passion for trail maintenance and advocating and everything. But one of our goals with the Teen Trail Corps program, one of our long-term audacious goal, was to eventually have a Teen Trail Corps, somebody who had earned Teen Trail Corps captain as a student athlete in every land. Every time there's a decision being made about trails, whether it's an agency or whatever, somebody at that table was a Teen Trail Corps captain as a kid. And I think that even though Teen Trail Corps captain might not be around anymore, that's still a really good goal for the Teen Trail Corps program. And I can't speak on that because I'm not involved anymore, but I hope that it's still we want somebody who was involved in Teen Trail Corps as a kid to be sitting at that table as an adult making those decisions.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the torch has to continue to be carried, right?
Yep.
Let's transition to Arrowhead Bike Farm.
Yeah.
Is that the next chapter?
Pretty much, yeah. So I actually got involved with Arrowhead Bike Farm about the same time that I joined NICA National. It was actually probably like half a year before I got the job at NICA. But it was actually a business partner named Rich, who originally founded the Arrowhead Bike Farm with another business partner of his. And Rich was basically the financier, and this other guy was the operator. And they had a falling out their very first year. That was like around Labor Day weekend, 2015 is when they opened. And then that very first year, they had a major falling out, and the other guy bounced out. And so then Rich was, he still had a full-time job. He didn't want to kill the bike farm. He wanted to keep it going. He limped through that next summer, but he was looking for friends, right? So 2017, I think, is when we started talking about coming on board. And I think that we officially came on board like January 2018 or something. And so then it was myself and another partner and actually two other partners. So there's four of us total. And Rich was still doing his thing. And Rich was also a major beer guy. So a lot of our beer knowledge originally came from Rich. We also had a marketing partner. One of our other partners, Adam, was the original operator. And then I was more of the behind the scenes with tours and clinics and trail risk management stuff on property and everything, and some of the stuff at the campground as well. And so that was about 6 months or so before I joined NICA. And so then I got the job with NICA National, and they really just, it was more like for me, the bike farm was more of a hobby because we had an operator. And then when it was that 2023, my partner, who was the operator, he had family stuff come up and he needed to move to North Carolina. And so at that point, it was, we needed to make a big decision. And I decided it was, I had done about I think I was almost at my 5-year anniversary with NICA National. I decided, yeah, it's a good time. I'll quit my job here and go run the bike farm.
Let's talk about the bike farm. What it is, because it's, when I initially started writing down things about the bike farm, I thought about it as a trifecta, but then I got to 4 and then 5. And I'm like, wait, there's more than 3 things.
I've done exactly that. We had that exact conversation yesterday as we're trying to figure out we want to do a new front sign. And it's been on our priority list for a long time, but never high enough, right? But we're like, what all do we put on our front sign? Because it's really an eclectic, weird place. But we are, at the core of it, we're a mountain biker hangout. Like that is like our core identity is a place for mountain bikers to hang out. It's a type of place that we would want to hang out. And so we just built the type of place that we want to hang out. And ultimately, though, we're a hangout for anybody, anybody who loves the outdoors. I'd say mountain bikers are not even the majority of our customers. They're a significant percentage for sure, but we also have rock climbers are a huge percentage, boaters, hikers, and just general national park visitors is all really big. And just families from the area. We get both people from the locals and tourists coming out. And so ultimately we are a bike shop that does rentals and tours. We are a restaurant and bar, the Handlebar and kitchen. And then we're also a campground. And within our campground area, we have a pump track. We have some small kind of a dirt jump flow line area. And we have some small amount of trails on our property. And then the real magic is that we are directly across the street from the New River Gorge National Park. So you can ride directly from our trails into the national park, accessing about, depending on where you're going, you can access like 3 different really popular trailheads directly from our property. And they're some of the most popular trails in the park. So that is like one of our easiest trail that we'll send folks to right off the bat, is also one of the most popular trails for hiking and riding in the park. It's called Long Point. And it's just like a chill 3.5 mile round trip. It is mountain biking, so there's some roots and some rocks and some hills, but it's beginner friendly for about 90% of our beginners. And then you have to there's a bike rack, park your bike, and walk out the rest of the way. And it just opens up on this huge rocky outcropping, and you're looking at like like 200 something degree view of the New River Gorge, and you got like the famous bridge, and you got endless wall across the gorge, just this endless cliff band. And you got some waterfalls in the distance, and you can hear a major waterfall like right below you, and you got the bridge, the train down below you, and you can see the whitewater rafters and the boats, and it's just like it's an epic spot, you know.
If you haven't been to the New River Gorge, like it's incredible to see just the arch bridge, like just that in itself.
And that's what, and people don't realize when they're driving south or north on 19 and they drive across that bridge. If you're not paying attention, you have no idea. Like it takes a few seconds to drive across the bridge. And if you're really paying attention, you might look out and be like, wow, this is a pretty sizable place that we're driving over, but you can't see down, right? So you have no idea like really how high you are. And if you don't pull over and look at one of the viewpoints, you don't realize what a massive bridge. And it's the longest single arch bridge, or like clear span bridge in the country and in the Western Hemisphere. And used to be the longest in the world until China built a couple more bigger than it. But yeah, I mean, it's a phenomenal, it's about 900 feet tall. And I might get the number wrong. I think it's about quarter mile long or so. I'm not positive on that.
That seems about right.
Yeah.
The 900 feet definitely checks out because Corey told me the same number.
Oh, cool. Perfect. And then once a year, they have a festival where they actually close the highway. I'm still astounded they ever got, the federal government to agree to close an entire highway for a day. And they have a festival where you can actually walk out on the bridge. They got vendors and tents and everything set up. And it's the one day a year that you're allowed to base jump off the bridge. So all day long, they've got base jumpers jumping off the bridge, people watching and cheering. And they've got a giant catapult that just like launches base jumpers into the air. It's just a awesome, fun experience. There's also a tour experience below the bridge where there's a maintenance catwalk under the bridge. And now you can take a tour down there where you clip into a harness and walk the path. And then that's open all year round. But it's a cool spot, And then there's a fun scenic road below the bridge as well. And we offer our mountain bike trips, and we also have e-bikes so people can e-bike out and ride that road all the way down and back up. And then along with the bridge, I mean, we just got epic climbing. The first thing the New River Gorge was really famous for was whitewater, probably in like the 60s or 70s. I'm not an expert, so some whitewater folks might jump in here and correct me. But I think around the 60s, 70s, whitewater really took off and became popular. And so it was really like the 80s, 90s that it was booming. And then around the same time, I think the 80s is when rock climbing was first like really getting going out here. Maybe as early as the 70s. Then the 80s, 90s is when it got really popular. So the place was already really famous for whitewater and rock climbing, and there's cliffs everywhere. And then within the last decade, mountain biking has really taken off as well.
Yeah, let's talk about that. The mountain biking.
Yeah, so part of the magic here is that we've got what we're named after, the Arrowhead Trails, is a trail system within the national park that is purpose built for mountain biking. And it is pretty, I don't remember the exact, it might have been around 2011. So I can't remember exactly, but there was a decision at the federal level that allowed mountain biking within national parks. And it was up to individual national parks whether they were going to allow it or not within their park. So at the time, the New River Gorge was one of the few, and honestly, it wasn't a national park. It was a national park unit, which is still operated under many of the same rules as national parks, but not exactly the same rules. But it's still like they had to decide, are we going to allow mountain biking or not? And ultimately, they decided to allow it. And I think a large part of that is because of the Boy Scouts and local advocacy for it. And then at the time, they were one of the very few national park units that even allowed mountain biking, definitely one of the earliest. And so I don't know exactly how it started, but basically the Boy Scouts, because of the summit coming in, Boy Scouts have an arm or a kind of an organization, a sub-organization within the Scouts called Order of the Arrow. It's kind of like a educational leadership training organization for kids than Boy Scouts. And the Order of the Arrow brought in 3,000 Boy Scouts over the course of a month and worked with the national park and IMBA. IMBA provided the trail planning and crew leaders. And so then each IMBA crew leader had like a gaggle of Boy Scouts with them. And over a month, they cycled out 3,000 Boy Scouts and they built about 15 miles of trail in the Arrowhead trails in 1 month. Hand built, all hand built.
Do you happen to know any of the people at IMBA that helped that? I mean, I'm assuming Joe.
I'm sure. I'm sure Mike Repiak knows. Rich Edward definitely is part of that for sure. Yeah, definitely ask them. I'm sure they've got some stories too. It had to have been a crazy month for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean to cycle that many people through in that short amount of time, just in itself is a feat. Much less get like organized and accomplish 15 miles of trail in that short period of time. Yep,
exactly. And I'm kind of surprised I've never really asked those questions myself when I have been with the IMPA folks. But I am, I'm definitely curious as to like how many crews they had going at once and how many kids were in each crew, what their average
output was,
length per day or something like that for each crew. Definitely interesting. And it's a good stacked loop, classic IMPA style, It's got a nice 1 mile beginner loop in the center of it, a 3 mile, pretty easy, but more elevation gain and loss trail around kind of the outer edge of that. And then 2 trails on the outer edge that are more technical intermediate trails. They're mostly pretty fun and flowy with some sections of Technar throughout. And then I think at the time, West Virginia was known for just being really technical trails all over the place. And there weren't a lot of options for beginners. And so I think it was 2011 when the trail system was built. And it was a really good, just good beginner to intermediate trail system for folks. And then it also opens up into the New River Gorge National Park proper. Well, at the time, it was just the National Scenic River, where there's a lot more like old school raw trails, a mixture of like Technar, and then just some a lot of old logging roads and that type of stuff. So there's a lot of good beginner friendly stuff that way as well, where it's just very rail trail like, but it's more dirt,
Doing beginner trail in West Virginia is tough because there is a term that I learned when I was there last month that was West Virginia flat. I don't know, up to 15% probably.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, which is actually a cool statistic, is that West Virginia is the least flat state in America. And I don't think there's an official agency out there recording that, but there's some guy took like a mathematical, basically, if you could stand in one spot all over the state and look out like 20 miles, are you going to hit a hill or not, And then just puts dots across the entire state. And so while there are other states in the country that have much higher mountains, and some people might consider them, more epic or whatever, but West Virginia mountains are super rugged, and it's the least flat state in America because the entire state is within the Appalachian Mountains. The only flatness you can find around here is down by creek bottoms and river bottoms. You have a few wider river valleys as you get more out to like the closer to the Ohio River, and the big tributaries to the Ohio as they get close to it have some pretty wide valleys. But they still, a wide valley in West Virginia is only a few miles wide. You're still looking at a mountain on both ends of you,
Well, look at flying into Charleston.
Oh yeah, it's fun. You're like, wait, is that a mountaintop? Am I landing on a mountaintop? Yeah. And they did have a big portion of one of the runways collapsed just a few years ago from mudslide, complicated running an airport on top of a mountain.
Trail One Components, exceptionally crafted mountain bike components that support great trails. I personally run the Crockett Carbon Bars, the American-made Rockville stem, and the Hell's Gate grips on both my Trail Light and Enduro bikes. These parts are the real deal, lightweight, bomb-proof, and comfortable for my old hands and wrists. Trail One goes beyond great gear. Every component is named after a real trail, and a portion of every purchase goes directly back into trails. So when you upgrade your bike, you are also giving back to trails. When you purchase Trail One components using the affiliate link on the Trail Effect website or in the show notes, you are not just supporting your favorite trails and upgrading your bike, you are also supporting this podcast. Trail One components offer a lifetime warranty along with fast and free shipping. So I reached out to a coworker of mine and I said, hey, I think you lived at the Arrowhead Bike Farm for a season, because we had some staff that were there when they were building out Needle's Eye. And he had brought up something called the Burning Bike Celebration.
Yeah. So it's been a pretty small kind of mountain bike. I don't even call it a festival. It's just a party we throw every year where I utilize my Boy Scout skills and I lash together a bike so it's all flammable. I use like manila rope and lash together all these spars that I harvest out of our woods, and we use wheels from old like wire spools. We just get those free from friends in town, and lash together a giant bike, and it is really hokey looking. And we put it on top of the fire, and then we have some music and drink some beers and burn a giant bike.
It's like West Virginia's version of mountain biking Burning Man without.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. It's maybe a little bit more family friendly than Burning Man. It's just a fun time. Yeah, it's a good time. And this year, actually, I don't know if we'll wrap it in or not. We're actually planning a new mountain bike festival for the region this year. It's going to be in October. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but there is an enduro race wrapped up into it. So the enduro race is going to be at Ace Resort. That's already announced on the West Virginia Enduro Series website. So that weekend of that enduro race is going to be a big old festival. We'll have stuff here at the bike farm. We'll have stuff in downtown Fayetteville. I think we'll have some stuff down in Beckley as well, because there's new trail. There's new trails in Fayetteville. There's new trails down in Beckley. The area is just exploding in new trails, and it's really awesome to see. And I think this festival in October is going to be a really awesome showcase of all the new stuff we've been building, plus the level of instruction and guiding that we have down here as well.
Let's talk about that quick before we close this one. You're part of the West Virginia Mountain Bike Association, if I'm not mistaken. A board member for that?
I am. I'm a board member. I think I'm technically like there's different levels, but because I'm a venue.
There's a race series with that as well, correct?
So there's a race series all over West Virginia, and our race here at the bike farm will be in June, I think, this year, and it's called Braps and Taps. And so it's a classic cross-country race. Our race is a little bit infamous for not having a ton of passing opportunities, so you really got to it helps to know the route and know where your passing spots are, because the Arrowhead trails are very single track heavy, which is what mountain bikers love, right? And we don't have a lot of gravel roads right there next to us. That is one of the awesome magics of West Virginia, is that there is dirt roads and gravel roads crisscrossing the state everywhere you want to go. But specifically for this race, it's very single track heavy. And it's just a fun time. We start and end at the bike farm. So you're ending right below the bar overlooking the finish line. And there's people out there with a bonfire going. And it's a really good fun time. And then the WVUMBA, West Virginia Mountain Bike Association, has a really fun race series from early spring through late summer, all throughout the state. They also do a fair amount of trail advocacy and building as well.
Yeah, when I looked it up, it was one of those. So a lot of times you'll see a trail org will be, kind of more on the advocacy and trail building side and maybe not so much on the racing side. And when I was looking at that organization last night, doing some homework for this, I noticed that you guys were kind of had racing front and center, but you did not shy away from also talking about and doing having scheduled trail work days and doing the general advocacy side of things, which is super important, which is good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that West Virginia mountain bikers, I don't know if it's more so than other places, but the West Virginia mountain bike scene is definitely very cognizant of, we are the ones getting these trails done. And if we're not involved in advocacy, nobody will be. No one's just going to build these trails for us. We got to make it happen.
Before we hit record, one of the things you had brought up was that Bryce Scherbach had been down there at the summit. Mm-hmm. And one of the comments you had made is that, we have a lot more trails now than we did then.
Yeah, absolutely. So when Bryce came down, I think he explored the Arrowhead trails and he explored the summit. And then he was kind of on a West Virginia tour. So he had explored other areas of West Virginia. But now we've got Wolf Creek Park, which is a very short drive away or a slightly longer bike ride from the bike farm. And it's a county park. So we're able to do a lot more stuff there that we couldn't do in the national park. So it's a lot more feature rich. There's real drops and jumps and mostly drops and like log rides and kind of big rock created features, And then very recently, what your coworkers were down here helping build was Needle's Eye. And Needle's Eye is a small mountain trail. I think it's only about 6 miles of trail total. There are ideas for expanding that, but the trail that is there is really fun, really gnarly, and it's one of the few like really serious downhill trails we have. And so it's a fun trail to bring out for the enduro break or to take a full suspension e-bike on, because it's just got really gnarly big rock features, big rock drops, and then a quick loop back to the top, or you can keep going down. It kind of gets more into like a flowy downhill trail all the way to the bottom, and you can come up a couple different options for coming up Blue Trail to climb back up. And so it's just a great, like, you could get multiple laps on it. If you're just going for like that downhill gnar, you can get multiple laps on it pretty well. And it's very close to Ace Resort. I keep hearing rumors about Ace expanding their mountain bike trails as well, which they're going to have to. They've committed to doing a race there this fall. So I definitely hope they get their trails built up. I know that they've got some plans on the ground, and I have heard what's going on there. But yeah, they've got some awesome. And Ace has some amazing potential, good terrain for really amazing trails. They build it, and then there's more trail in Beckley planned as well. The Piney Creek Preserve. You've probably talked to Corey about that. I was recently down there just hiking around, checking that stuff out. I'm pretty stoked because it's actually like it's my in-laws neighborhood. Like they back right up to it, so I'm going to be able to get my kids out there and ride those trails whenever we go down there. So I'll be really excited about that for sure.
Before we wrap up every episode, I'm going to say now, because I didn't do this at the beginning, but I'm trying to get people, when I get people back on, they get to answer this question. And that is, first, I'm going to give the instruction of answer this as selfishly as you can. Don't give what you think might be the popular answer. Give like your personal answer. And with that, say you had to move from the Fayetteville area for whatever reason. I have to go. What are the things that you would look for in a trail community to move to?
Yeah, cool. The selfish answer, right? So the selfish answer, I guess it's not that selfish. Well, no. The selfish answer is awesome trails, right? I want a plethora of awesome trails that I can ride right from my door. I know that like when I lived in Ashville, North Carolina, or when I lived in, I was going to school near Asheville, and I was like, oh, there's really fun trails on property, and Asheville is such this amazing town because the trails are like right out but realistically, I was still driving like an hour to go to those trails, unless you lived in Bend Creek neighborhood and you were riding right from those trails. And then I moved out west, and in Vail, like I was literally riding out my door. I was riding just right out my door on epic trails, and maybe like they were harder, like you had to, ride for longer to get to them or whatever. But that was pretty fun. So I think being able to ride right from your door is really clutch. I used to live in downtown Fayetteville, and I could do that from there. Now I live out of town a bit, and just needed more space for my family, and I kind of miss that, being able to ride right from the door. It'd be nice if I lived here at the bike farm, right? But so I think that's the important, and a mixture of fun trails too. Like I am an expert rider, so I want expert trails to ride. I recognize, like as a bike advocate, I recognize the need for more beginner-friendly trails and more intermediate trails. But I also really want more expert trails, and that's something that we're kind of lucky here in West Virginia. Like there is definitely probably not the popular answer or the correct answer for the mountain bike industry. But there's a lot of big landholding companies here that don't care at all what you're doing. The timber companies, coal mine companies, or just general like landholding companies that have owned the land for eons, and they don't control the property. So that's where I've got a dirt bike. I ride my dirt bike out there, and mountain bike, and you can go find the gnar out there pretty easily, and I just don't tell people about it, And so that's one thing I really love about West Virginia is some of that kind of like that, I don't know, that philosophy of the outdoors, and then the ability specifically in this area to ride so easily and quickly, right? Whether I'm at work or if I was living in Fayetteville. So if I had to move away from the Fayetteville area, the thing I would be looking for in a trail community is that I want a mixture of trails. I do have a family, so I do want those beginner friendly trails as well. But I want to be able to ride right from my house. And I want like a mixture of just really awesome, fun trails, ideally downhill oriented. I really kind of do miss that. Being in West Virginia, we've got some good downhill trails, but I miss like having being close enough to like a chairlift. I used to be, before I was a family man, I was up at Snowshoe every other weekend. But now it's a little harder. But as my kids go older, I expect to be up there a lot more again. So I'd say a new trail town would have quick access to gnarly mountain biking and some beginner friendly stuff, and good downhill shuttle or chairlift options as well. And then because I'm a family man, I also got to have like a good supportive community. You got to have like good schools, a good community that rallies behind people and not just big companies or whatever.
Yeah, that's.
I don't want to get too much into politics.
No, we don't have to. The more trails close to home, as Imbo likes to say, is becoming the selfishly popular answer. Mm-hmm. And, I think that's just, it's becoming more and more apparent as people experience that, and they experience how nice it is to not have to load their bike in their vehicle to drive, say 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever it is to get to their closest trail system, especially when it comes to like having a full-time job. I want to go do a quick hour after work. You might only have an hour, maybe you only have 45 minutes, right?
Yeah.
It's becoming a vitally important asset for communities. So I thank you for answering that way, becoming popular, and it's a selfish answer, but it's also a selfish answer.
I mean, that's what I found is that, my best opportunity to ride is kind of like right now, really. It's like the time that I drop my kids off for school or daycare, and then I get to work and the shop opens at 10. So ideally I have that like hour and a half between getting to work and the shop opening that I can like get out and ride if I don't have something to do,
Yeah. Well, Phil, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to talk about mountain biking in China, Bolivia, Vail.
Yeah, absolutely.
Indiana, all the places in between. Cause those are some stuff that was some stuff that I definitely did not have on my radar that you did, which now we're going to have to go dive into Bolivia and check that whole scene out. So
yeah, I definitely reach out to, I'd be happy to send you some contacts for Alistair or some Bolivian contacts as well. Because the race scene down there, I mean, it's so super cool seeing such an awesome race scene in Bolivia and Peru. And then just the industry that Alistair spawned with gravity assisted mountain biking is just phenomenal. It's like it's like the thing. Like if you are if you're on the traveling circuit or whatever, and you go through La Paz, Bolivia, that's like the thing that you have to go do is go ride the death road. It's pretty awesome, yeah. And it's just like those trails. I mean, I've ridden all over the world. So, my favorite. Obviously, I love trails in West Virginia. I love trails in Moab. I've spent a lot of time in Moab, many trips, and British Columbia. But the gnarliness of the Inca roads in Bolivia just doesn't compare to anything else. Like being able to start on a road that is still perfectly paved from the day that the Incan laborers placed those stones like 500 years ago or whatever, and then as you descend through like the cloud forest and then the jungle, and it just turns into like the gnarliest rock garden you've ever ridden. And it's miles, you're descending like 12,000, 13,000 feet over 40 miles. And there's some like major climbs in the middle too. Like it's not all downhill. There's some decent climbs that are like hike a bike. Like you're literally hiking your bike up like stone stairs that make you feel like you're like in Indiana Jones or something. It's so rad. It is so rad. You definitely got to go ride if you ever get a chance. Takesi. My favorite one's Takesi and El Churro. My favorite Inca road is Takesi. That's the absolute best one down there.
So I have to ask, because somebody's going to want to know this. What's the ideal bike for riding that? Is it a longer travel trail bike? Obviously, if it's got some climbing, you want to have some level of efficiency.
Yeah, but honestly, like they're so gnarly that most of the climbing is hike bike. Okay. You're really not doing that much pedaling uphill. There is kind of at the beginnings and the ends, you've got more kind of dirt road type stuff to get in and get out. Especially like the KZ, you've got like a good what is it, like 3,000 foot climb up a double track to even start the trail at like, then you're at like 15,500 feet or 16,000 feet, something like that. Yeah, so you're really high up there. Yeah, exactly. So you're like huffing and puffing. You could just be hiking biking because you can't pedal at that low of oxygen level. So for me at the time, like I was riding an Orange 5 at the time, and I felt like it was a little bit underpowered. Santa Cruz Nomad would be perfect. There's a Santa Cruz company down there, Santa Cruz and Kona. So I did come back from that experience with my own Santa Cruz Nomad, and that was the first 3 I had. Yeah, I would say like long travel trail bike is key. Downhill bike is generally overkill. There are some good trails out there for downhilling. The options there available if you want. And there's really good shuttle stuff, but I'd say the long travel trail bike is what would get you around on most of the trails down there. And there is cross country too. Like there is a cross country scene there, extremely tiny. The only people, I think I knew like 1 or 2 non-Bolivians that were involved in that, because like the lung capacity that you have to be able to consistently ride uphill. Like even, my apartment in Oz was near the bottom of the city and it was at like 12,500 feet. So like the lung capacity that you have to have for riding cross country at that level is just crazy. So we had a cross country tour that we sold, and I think it ran once the entire time I was down there. Somebody signed up for it once, but yeah.
So the correct answer as a Trek dealer would be a New Fuel LX or a
yes
or a Slash.
I'm a terrible business person. The Slash would be the perfect bike for taking to Bolivia with you.
Being from Wisconsin, I had to throw that in, knowing that you're literally a Trek dealer.
Yeah, I am a Trek dealer. we're also an Ibis dealer as well, and then done a lot with kids bikes these days. We're a Woom and Provello dealer. And then and Venton e-bikes as well.
Well, it's January. I don't know what the weather's like down there, but it's gotten weird here.
Yeah, it is actually nice and warm. It is so nice right now.
Is it?
And I've been doing a bunch of perk tests for building some new septic fields. Cool. That's on my radar today besides biking.
Well, I'll let you get to that. Again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking time for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Josh. I really appreciated your visit the other week, and I'm glad I was out. Thank you for the opportunity to come on and speak.
Thank you for listening. If you like what you've heard, please take the time to share these shows with others. Sharing these shows will help create awareness of both the guests who have taken the time to be on the show and the podcast series itself. Also, if you're new to the Trail Effect Podcast, check out our ever-expanding library of episodes. If you listen to the Trail Effect Podcast on Apple or Spotify, please don't forget to leave a rating and review, as this is one of the best ways to show our support for the Trail Effect Podcast. For additional ways to help support the Trail Effect Podcast, check out the affiliate links tab at the Trail Effect website, where you'll find links to Kettle Mountain apparel and Trail One components. By using the affiliate links found at www.traileffectpodcast.com, a small commission will come back to the podcast, which will help keep this thing going. This podcast has been edited and produced by Evolution Trail Services. Thank you again for listening.